One of the things that's unique when I walk to the plant, you look at any given pencil and you wonder whose hands that pencil will arrive in and what will it create. It could create drawings, it could create text, it could create prose. I mean, the sky's the limit.
Welcome, folks, to another fine episode of the Pencil Pushers podcast, where we celebrate the love of the hand-drawn arts and the tools that make them possible. I'm your humble host, Mike Rosato, and today we've got a special one for you. Today's conversation brings us inside one of the last pencil factories in the United States, one of the oldest pencil factories in the United States as well. So I'm very excited about this for you guys and myself. I'm joined by Scott Johnson, president of Musgrave Pencil Company, and Tim Delger, the creative lead helping shape how the brand shows up in the world today. Scott's journey to leading a century-old manufacturer is anything but typical, from engineering and large-scale infrastructure work to guiding a company rooted in American craftsmanship. Tim, meanwhile, helps translate that legacy into a living, breathing brand, making sure the story of the pencil connects with artists, designers, students, and everyday thinkers in a digital world. We'll talk about what it takes to keep a pencil factory alive in the 21st century, how technology has changed the way we think about analog tools, and why something as simple as a pencil still holds power in how we learn, design, and create. So whether you're sketching, scribbling, note tasking, or just love the smell of a freshly sharpened pencil, I invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Scott Johnson and Tim Delger. Gentlemen, thank you for being on the podcast. This is a treat.
It's a privilege. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So a little bit of background for me and for those listening, I did talk a little bit about it in the beginning. I first really, as designers and illustrators at the studio, the pencil and the paper are two key tools to our craft. And we still hold that as of great importance to the way we work. We're constantly talking about that in storytelling, about how important the hand-drawn aspect is of, as Milton Glaser has said many times over, drawing is thinking. So pencils are a really key part of that story. And it was really awesome to think about the difference that I caught when I was going through social media. And I'm sure this is partially part of Studio Delger's work, but when I started seeing the awesome footage and craftsmanship that was being shown on social media, it really gave a fresh take and made me kind of salivate over wanting more pencils in my hand and just wanting to be in that shop. I mean, there's nothing like going into a blue collar factory, as I've done before with print studios and sign companies and other manufacturing companies like that. There's something so tangible and physical in such a beautiful way about that. So when I saw that stuff on social media, and we've been watching it over the past couple of years, at a certain point, I was like, we've been interviewing all these designers and artists all this time. It's time to talk to the people that are actually making those tools. So with all that being said, I really am excited to jump into the story of Musgrave and how you guys interacted together. So if you don't mind, to get people kind of up to speed and get to know you a little bit more, I'd love to start with you, Scott. Tell me about your path to Musgrave. How did this all come to you? I think you've been with the company for about 6 or 7 years or so in this leadership position. Tell me about, where are you from? How did you get to Musgrave?
Well, I'm affectionately known as the accidental pencil guy, Mike. Started out life with an engineering degree, and as happens to many people, life is what happens to you while you make your plans. And so I spent several years in design and construction, both in power generation and then in institutional facilities, primarily healthcare, designing projects. And the funny anecdote I'll say is I started out life with a mechanical pencil and a T-square doing drawings. And so there is a little bit of residual history in my past, even as an engineer, of course. So pencils were very common in our journey. In the late 80s, I married into the Hewlin family. The Hewlin family are the owners of Musgrave Pencil Company. And I married one of the daughters of one of the owners in 1988. And we journeyed through our careers. And actually, Mike, I've been with the company about 4.5 years now.
Okay.
And 55 this summer. And as with many small family businesses, there was it was time for another leadership transition from one generation to the next. And when a company faces this moment, they can either sell or keep it in the family and try to continue the legacy. And it was a moment in my life when I had availability and hopefully ability to lead the charge, and found myself at Musgrave in the summer of 21. And so I traded in plane tickets, conference rooms, and engineering design, and for production in the pencil world. That's how I arrived.
What was that? Was it a hard gut check? Was it an easy shift? I mean, this is a big role, right? This is a big shift from being perhaps, just having a normal sort of 9 to 5 job into becoming the leader of a business that's been around for so long. And there's a lot, there's a lot of weight potentially to that, right?
There's certainly a lot riding on the line, but one of the great things about Musgrave in particular is our family culture and the wonderful staff, the wonderful history, certainly the support of the family as well. It's certainly a significant pivot from my experience and skill set into the manufacturing world, where now I need to learn and understand and manage supply chain, manage employee culture, manage a product quality, manage product diversity, of course, the marketing, the branding, the sales, and everything that goes along with that to keep us running successful. So I would say that the landscape of topics that I have to manage has grown, but it's a lot of fun, Mike. I have to tell you that we are having a lot of fun. One of the things that's unique when I walk to the plant, you look at any given pencil and you wonder whose hands that pencil will arrive in and what will it create. It could create drawings, it could create text, it can create any prose. I mean, the sky's the limit. So anyway, I do love it.
Awesome. Before I get to Tim, Scott, what were some of the things that you wanted to, as you stepped into this role, what were some of the things that perhaps you wanted to make sure stayed the same? And perhaps what were some of the things that you felt like maybe needed to shift?
We enjoy a loyal following from clientele, and I want to make sure that loyalty and our return loyalty to our customers did not change. Our customers are our lifeblood, but we wanted to maintain and grow product of diversity and quality that continue to engage and bring value to our clients. Change, I would say, is in the facility, Mike. When you come onto Musgrave's campus, you'll see a building that's been around. The current building's been around since the 1930s, which has all of the great atmosphere around that, but it also has some of the legacy warts, I will say, just from a facility standpoint, that need to be fixed and upgraded and updated and that sort of thing. So how do you preserve the look and feel of the company while also ensuring its continuance physically? And so that was probably top of mind in answering my question.
Tim, tell me about yourself. What is your role at Studio Delger, and how did things come together with you being a part of Musgrave's history? And talk a little bit about what your role at the studio is in regards to the partnership.
Yeah. Well, the relationship with Musgrave came before our studio even began. So Nicole, my wife, and I are partners. We own and run Studio Delger together. And for years prior to this, I had a career in advertising agency. So I was an art director and designer in a handful of advertising agencies, kind of bouncing around until we landed in Nashville. Since Nicole was from here, it was always clear that we were going to have roots in Nashville one way or another, So after about 10 years, we got back here, and I spent another 6 in an agency here in town. And all along the way, Nicole had her own communications consulting company, and I would help out on her clients from time to time if they needed a little designed asset, icon, something like that. We still can't figure out how we got contacted by Harper from Musgrave, but one day this email shows up in Nicole's inbox saying, "Hey, I run this pencil factory. We're looking to refresh our brand. We need some help on our website. Is this something you guys would be interested in?" And we had done a couple of projects for some bigger brands that I think kind of set the stage for us. So we were looking at each other like, I cannot believe how amazing this opportunity is. This 100-year-old pencil factory that can really use our help. And you start to imagine what that should feel like and look like. So she replies to this email and I read it and I was like, you got to take some of the exclamation points out of this thing. Like, we got to act like we've been there before. Like, let's dial it back. But we are super excited. We're super excited about just the opportunity. And so that's how we got started with them. And we went down there to the factory and visited with those guys, and I just got a sense of like, it was exactly as magical as you hope it would be.
Was this at this point where had the partnership started, or were you still sort of getting to know each other? Or
we kind of put a quick proposal together of like, here's how we can help with just a kind of simple like branding, and we'll help you with your website. And that was kind of it. And they said, okay, let's do it. So we were on board and going down there to kind of, learn about the place a little bit. And the story I always like to tell is they handed me this box. It was just like a cardboard FedEx box full of old photos. Like, these are photos from the 30s and 40s. Some of them were like digitized on CDs that I couldn't like necessarily access anymore. Some of them had never been scanned and like archived before. So I got back home with that box of these old photos. It was like, this is very precious. Like, this is the history of this company in a lot of ways, So that was like one of the first things I did was just scan those old photos. And that sort of started to seed some of the social media work that we did. And that whole process was about how do we kind of resurface and tell the heritage story of the brand alongside some of the kind of, refreshing of some of the packaging and products and things like that.
Wow. So it seems like it's fairly full scoped in terms of the kind of soup to nuts partnership, in terms of the creativity, like everything from social media, in terms of content, brand identity update. Is that true? Or
yeah, that's pretty accurate. I mean, we did that project, and then there was just like kind of clearly more work to be done. So we kind of rearranged the relationship to just have a kind of ongoing, partnership. And so we manage their social media. We don't do that for any other clients. We just have like that's kind of always been our baby, help with website updates. We've done a lot of packaging design, some product development type stuff, tons of photography. I mean, just, it's pretty much like full service creative, I guess, direction and execution of the kind of public facing brand of Musgrave.
Yeah. What was the process? And I'm assuming that this is before Scott was involved when you first started the partnership, right?
That's correct.
Right.
So talk a little bit about the process of taking this heritage brand. There's a little bit, because we've been in similar situations too, where, you have this heritage brand and there's extra care that needs to happen, right? From an aesthetic standpoint. Walk us through what that was like. I'm sure it was probably slightly daunting, but also, an amazing, passionate challenge. What was it like, the process of making that evolution happen?
Yeah. I mean, I had all these kind of epiphanies in that early kind of phase, because I realized I was kind of acting almost as a curator as much as a creative designer in any aspect. Look at all these cool things that have been used in the past, all the little dies on all the pencils that somebody had designed, even if their role wasn't designer, somebody had put this together. So what are the pieces that we can pull and kind of resurface and kind of knock the dust off and kind of put back in a modern context? So that's one. And then the whole time I was just formulating this idea of like, I am working in a collaborative way with somebody from the past, and they don't know it and they don't really have a voice, I acknowledge, but it's a cool thing to feel this like collaborative spirit with all this work. And so I think a big thing that we did was we created packaging design for a bunch of the kind of core products that Musgrave sells at retail. And it would have been pretty easy to say, let's clean everything up. Let's unify the look. Let's make sure it's all the same font and these limited colors, to like make it feel modern or whatever. But instead we said, let's just keep all of that old charm. It's
already there,
warm with this like humanity, and then sort of some imperfections with the way it was printed and the way it was designed over the years. So let's do everything we can to retain as much of that, and then express it, on the packaging, on the website, on apparel, wherever it is. And I think that's kind of where the care comes in, is how do I make essentially like a vector asset of this thing that was printed on a piece of wood 50 years ago, and retain the little bumps and gnarled that you're really tempted to clean up and like almost resist doing that.
So how did you do it?
I mean, I took photos of pencils. I scanned pencils. I live traced some of the text that was on them, and
Cleaned them up after that.
did a little bit of cleanup. But it's like, well, am I going to fix the filled in counter in this A, or should I just leave it a little wonky? So all the wonk is like, I really love that stuff. So that's what I had, and I just kind of continually am like keeping these assets wherever we can find. Sometimes we'll find a whole, like, somebody opened a file drawer and there's a whole bunch of old dies in here. Well, let's make something with these, And so new products actually present themselves in that way too, because with a 100-year-old building, I mean, there's things like literally there's stuff tucked behind cabinets and stuff that you just discover and like, let's put it out there. This continues to tell the story of this company.
So jealous of like you spending so much time in that factory. Now, Scott, now, even though you weren't in this position you are now, I'm sure peripherally you were, you knew that this engagement was happening. Is that right? Where they had they had Tim and his crew coming in there, revamping and updating some of the core assets there, or no?
Not really, but I knew of it because I experienced it as a family member who liked to engage with business from time to time with no real understanding of what was going on behind the scenes in the transformation. And I'm going to brag on Tim and Nicole and the studio. They have done such a tremendous job. So the other thing that has happened since then, that they might take one of our super cool products and we can create new around that, and then they elevate it. We've had some opportunities to take advantage of certain happenings in, help me Tim, in the public media or trends and that sort of thing, and take advantage of that in the development of new products while using and still being true to the identity that was developed in the brand originally. Anyway, sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent, but so all that to say, it was fun to kind of get on the entrance ramp onto the design freeway, if you will, and join in that.
Yeah. On that note too, thinking about the balance of staying true to traditions versus where does innovation and technology kind of come into play. My understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you made sort of a conscious decision, and you sort of noted it a little bit at the beginning of the conversation, to keep production mostly manual still. Is that right? And also, like sourcing your own materials. What's guiding that decision, and how do you strike that balance and making sure that you've got that sort of hands-on approach while still, making things from a manufacturing standpoint streamlined and efficient, which of course can help with keeping costs down? How do you strike those balances?
Oh boy, that's it. If I could characterize it in succinctly, one of the things about Musgrave is, and let me start moving back up. One of the things about pencil manufacturing is that the basic processes have been the same for a long time. Certainly layers of automation and layers of precision have been added. And I got to tell you, Mike, as an engineer who worked in modern healthcare facilities and landed at Musgrave, my first instinct was somewhat to turn over the furniture and replace all the equipment, go as modern as possible, et cetera, et cetera. One of the surprising things I discovered was that our current technology has advantages for flexibility, to using different materials, and as well as flexing the needs, demands of our clients. So just to break that down a little bit, you can essentially buy a pencil production line where you put slats and cores in on one end and you get pencils out on the other end. Our process is broken up somewhat. We have the ability to surge and break those processes down one by one, and it gives us more flexibility around how much we run, how long we run, what we run, and so forth. See, to answer your other question, I just think that we have some advantages in being true to the technology that we have as we develop products going forward.
I'm always really curious about when I go into manufacturing plants, particularly the ones that seem to be in industries where it's fairly niche. When you're coming to adapting an existing machine that helps produce the pencils, it feels like the machinery that's used to actually make these pencils has to be fairly specific. It seems like there would be the companies that produce these products, the machines themselves, it seems like it would be a fairly tiny product line because there aren't that many pencil companies, right? That would need these products that make basically the machines that make them. Am I wrong in that, or is it fairly broad? Is it fairly? Are they prolific, these machines that are made to produce pencils?
I'll answer that in two ways. One is they are very purpose built. That's not a technology or a process that's adapted from any other industry. And so it is narrow and specific in terms of form and function.
Yeah.
But when you take a step back and look at the worldwide market for pencils, Mike, just think about the fact that 3.2 billion wood case pencils are consumed in the United States every year. And let's not fool ourselves. The lion's share of those come from overseas. When you think about that, and then think about the worldwide consumption of pencils beyond just the United States in more populated countries, actually the worldwide pencil industry is alive and well, and there are a lot of companies around the world who use these machines. And thus, there are several companies that build machinery for that purpose. Now, it's not broad as some other industries, but you would be surprised who all is quote unquote in the game in Asia, in Europe, and South America who build these purpose-built machines for what we do in such broad or such large volumes. Really
Yeah.
incredible.
That does give a lot of context. I appreciate that.
Sure.
For all of our art and design nerds that are listening who love to learn about the making of such things, can you walk us through a little bit about the birth of pencils in your factory, and walk us through what it's like? What is it? How is a pencil created?
Well, it starts before the factory, of course. Wood is harvested and run through a mill and built and sawn into the basic building blocks of a pencil, which is a pencil slat. And most of the industry uses a fairly similar size slat, roughly 5 millimeters thick, roughly 73 millimeters wide, roughly 184 millimeters long. And as you know, one of the most important attributes of a pencil, and therefore the wood that gets machined to make the pencil, is its machinability. And so all pencil slats are treated prior to input with a soft wax treatment process. And that varies depending on the species of wood that's used. I think people are familiar with incense cedar. We're here in Shelbyville because of eastern red cedar. Certainly poplar and basswood are a couple of other species that are used, but all of these species require soft treating prior to becoming an input. Now, so when we get that at Musgrave, we take that soft treated, and by the way, it has to be specifically non-toxic. We take that soft treated slat and we put it through what many people know as a molding machine. So that same machine that makes chair rail or crown molding for a house, we use a molding machine to saw specific grooves to accept the pencil core into the pencil. So that slat will get up to 9, say, cores, or I should say slots machined into the slats, into which the pencil graphite is accepted. And that is then a mirror image slat is placed over the top of that to make what's called a pencil sandwich.
Yeah, I saw the video.
You saw the video from the sandwich. So then the sandwich gets dried. Various companies use various different drying processes, but gets dried and then it gets milled and split into individual pencils, again, using a molding machine. And then it goes from there.
How long does it take to create a pencil once the slats are delivered and ready to start actually machining it?
About 24 hours at
Wow.
Musgrave. At Musgrave.
Wow.
Other
Okay.
companies use a mechanically enhanced drying process, and it would be in a matter of, say, 3 hours. Musgrave
Okay.
chooses to cure our sandwiches overnight.
Okay.
So anyway, so for us, it's about 24 hours.
What is why do you choose to do the slower process?
Well, there's a little bit of, it's the way we've always done it, and it's what we have in terms of, but we clamp those sandwiches together to create geometric stability. Nobody likes a warped pencil. So we choose to clamp those overnight. The glue has a chance to fully dry and cure so that we get a solid instrument when it is finally shaped.
Tim, how many demerits do you get if they see you with a Ticonderoga?
Oh my God. I mean, it's not allowed in our house. Let's just put it that way. My daughter found one at school or something. She brought one home from school. And I said, oh my gosh, I said, just sit at the kitchen table and draw with that and wait till mom sees you. It was a hilarious little prank. So we're friendly with all the pencil companies, but we're definitely a hardcore Musgrave only household.
Love it. Now, in all honest, or more seriously though, like when you see the process of manufacturing a Musgrave pencil, what gets you excited from a brand design and storytelling perspective?
Man, I mean, a couple of things. I mean, I've always been pretty handy and can make stuff and got my own garage full of tools. And so the process, I mean, any fast spinning blade involved in some type of process is just thrilling, so it's cool to just be at the factory and hear the sounds and smell the smells. Brand wise, there's two really powerful points about this. One is people love to see that stuff because it's evidence that this has been made by people in a place. It's real. And I think the word authenticity is probably a little overused, but it's this, you can touch it and it's you can see that it's not just it just doesn't appear. It goes through all this stuff. And that's fascinating to see that and appreciate that, work goes into this and there's humans involved. I think that's so important, so that's one thing, is just showcasing that process on, for the brand on social media and on web is really powerful, just to generate a brand affinity or whatever the words you want to put around it. I mean, people just love it. And it's saying we're here. You can kind of tell a big story by showing a small piece of a machine, or we're here, we're present. The other aspect for me working on the brand is we've had these scenarios where we can go down there and design a pencil in real time with everything available in the factory. And this is a designer's dream, because to get to touch and see and feel all the elements is not something we get to do every day. You can go to a printer and kind of fill paper and things like that. But to say, okay, here's, let's use this pencil with this core because I like the way it writes today. And this is the paint you have in stock, but let's use this foil. Let's see what foils you have in stock. This one's cool. What about this ferrule? The ferrule's a metal piece that holds the eraser. Do you have any copper ones? What about silver? What color erasers do we have? Blue's cool, yellow's cool, whatever. And so it's like you're inside of a big Lego kit that's designed to make pencils. So exciting, so hard not to get overwhelmed with all the options, but you can really efficiently generate a new product when you can be in the space that makes it. So that's the other thing that's just super exciting as a designer.
It's really fascinating to me and reassuring with every conversation that I have that's similar to this, which is, and something that I'm trying to shout at the rooftops, not only with this podcast and celebrating the hand-drawn arts, celebrating the human-made art and design and craft. And I just think that every time that I speak to people about that, there's such a resonating emotional connection that supersedes so much of what we see today, which is filled with so much fakeness and with AI and all this kind of stuff. I'm very curious considering that, and I'd love to hear from both perspectives, Scott and Tim, with technology evolving the way it has with consumers broadly, and thinking about it with the perspective of the pencil industry, with digital note taking, tablets, the iPad, with the Apple Pencil, and, how do you walk that line and that journey of the value of a pencil today without it feeling like you're finger wagging, or, trying to talk down to that's not real stuff. How do you talk through that? Well, let's start with Scott.
I'll take a stab at that. I think it starts with an invitation, Mike. It's an invitation to say, there's so much good around technology and so many things that help our lives and better our lives and go into so many different areas. But it's an invitation to take a step back. It's no different than getting up from your desk and taking a walk outside and getting a breath of fresh air and clearing your head. I think the analog experience, such as the pencil, gives you a chance to escape, and create that is not enhanced by anything outside of your own being. And again, whether that's writing, whether that's sketching, whether that's creating a work of art, this is really truly your own. And and it is flowing through your fingers in a way that makes it your own. So I'll start with that as an invitation to step away from, chaos is maybe a strong term, but a bit of the chaos of our technology enhanced world, and get back to your roots.
Love it. Tim?
Yeah, I mean,
You can beat that one, by the way. It's your challenge.
yeah, yeah. I think that first of all, any way that anyone is creating any type of artwork or whatever is fine by me. iPad, Apple Pencil, on paper, good. Just make stuff. That's first. And the tools are all valid. And I use them all too. But I definitely think through the Milton Glaser quote, which I'm not familiar with, surprisingly, but I think on paper, and you'll surprise yourself sometimes drawing on paper and like, oh, I didn't think of that. Wait, I just wrote it. It's a weird connection that you can have. And so there's value in that. I think the pencil is ubiquitous, and I don't think it's going anywhere. Every school child in the world interacts with it. That's why it's such an iconic object.
And they have a love for it, by the way.
Yeah, because you associate it with so many of those kind of early core memories, and that your brain is being, sort of growing when you're learning to write like that. I would also I think that digital experiences and assets, as we get flooded with them more and more, for me, are losing value just by nature of supply. And my hope is that means that real physical in the world interaction, music festivals, going to a restaurant, drawing on a piece of paper, retains a certain draw. And we're seeing, I think, the value of like the analog human interactions more and more.
Yes.
Again, like we're messing with AI. Let's see what it can do. But if Instagram is all of a sudden full of AI, I don't know why I want to be there anymore. Maybe we should just go to an art gallery. So that's my kind of old man get off my lawn thought about all that.
Yeah, it's very interesting where the line starts to change a little bit, because I've through the nature of my work and dealing with young designers that are about to graduate or have just graduated, I try to meet with as many as possible. And also through the podcast of speaking with creatives of all ages, from, as young as 23 to Milton Glaser was probably like in his late 80s when I think I interviewed him. The divide starts to break right around the early 20s, where they seem to be much more open with the possibility of using things like AI. I think there's something beautiful about the wall that's not up on it. As you say, it's any tool is great as long as you're creating good stuff. But what I have seen more than anything with creatives that I've interviewed on such a pretty large swath of demographics, and just being in the business, I find that most people really want to just keep things more tangible, tactile, physical. Everybody loves speaking of Nashville, I think Hatch Prince is there. Who doesn't want one of those posters? Who doesn't love having a beautiful pencil and a piece of paper to draw on? Who doesn't love having that canvas that they've done, that they've been able to paint something beautiful on? So I'm hopeful that as the AI, sort of hurricane is swirling around at this point, that, the sun will shine, and will kind of come back to stasis a bit, to your point, where people realize that, it's okay, but this format will never be replaced fully, is kind of how I feel about it. But that's my old man on the waving at the cloud scenario too. Kind of thinking about that a little bit deeper. Oh, Scott, did you have something else you wanted to add
Well,
to that?
I was just going to add that sketching transcends generations. You actually have a historical connection that goes back, centuries, if not millennia. And it's a way to stay connected that we can't say the same thing about the artificial intelligence or other technology tools that we're talking about. So I love that historical connection. For me personally,
Absolutely.
my uncle was a graphic artist in Wichita, Kansas. He designed the original Pizza Pete for Pizza Hut. So, it's a way for me to feel connected to family, and my cousin who still sketches or does graphic arts.
Yeah. Scott, and maybe this is not even an issue, but how do you navigate, a stigma that many times can be the case for US made products, as being, too expensive? How do you sort of walk that line of storytelling? Do you tend to be more expensive, less expensive than, say, pencils that are made across seas? And if so, if you are more expensive, how do you talk through it? Or is it just more about like storytelling through social media and other means like that to really get people emotionally connected in that?
Well, that's a great question, and one that we ask ourselves nearly each and every day. We think that there is special value from a quality standpoint in a U.S. made product here at Musgrave. And if I want to get legalistic, I have to be careful about what we claim is U.S. made, because the components, many of them come from overseas, not all. And so, and there is a place for what I will call the commodity pencil that enjoys a labor cost basis that is 5 to 10 times less than the United States, and has been established for 3 decades or more as a commodity pencil in, say, big box stores. And we know that we can't compete from a price basis. And so we're not trying to appeal. We're not trying to compete on a price basis and trying to get into the commodity lane simply because we know we can't compete there. Yet we have a great flexibility and nimbleness to create a custom product that it's really hard to source something that has a fairly quick response and the ability to customize a product for a client, from overseas. And people who are asking for custom products are typically willing to pay what they need to get what they need. And so, that is, Mike, that is probably the lion's share of what Musgrave is custom pencils for various markets and industries. And then for the Musgrave branded tier, which Tim and the studio have done such a beautiful job of helping us elevate, we appeal to that consumer who appreciates and is willing to appreciates the quality, appreciates the source, appreciates the history, the legacy, and that's what we try to emphasize and appeal to in terms of the brand. Tim, would you agree with what I'm saying there in terms of the studios helping us?
Yeah, I think that that's an important thing. It's easy to overlook for Musgrave is that very bulk is custom pencils for XYZ. So if you got a restaurant or like an oyster place, a golf course, a cruise line you're doing branding for, and you need to have a pencil that's custom made among, so many other things. I mean, I know when we have stuff made for clients, it can be so hard to source. Where am I going to get this hat made? Can I get on the phone with somebody and just get my questions answered? I don't know how this works. And so I think there's value in just literally like they're right here. You can talk to them. You can get the thing done and reasonably, priced and made on your timeline and all that stuff. So the custom piece of Musgrave's business is a huge deal. And you're not going to convince everybody. Some people are just going to purely be price shoppers, and there's a difference between price and value. And we can talk about the quality of the wood, or the glue is better, or the workers are treated this way or that. Some people are going to be convinced, some people aren't, but there's a whole bunch of people like us who just fall in love with something that has a story behind it and kind of, indicates that people actually care who are involved in making it.
Has the demands, or as time has moved on over the past several decades, how has the demand for pencils changed or evolved? Scott?
Yeah, the demand for pencils doesn't seem to be changing. I think when the pandemic hit, particularly, Mike, and people went to school from home, there was certainly a logical drop in demand, only because A, people weren't getting to school and having broader use, and B, people weren't getting out to shop, for accessories and stationery supplies, et cetera. That has returned in large part, and the demand remains steady, if not growing slightly, small percentages each year. And again, when you think about the number I mentioned earlier, 3.2 billion wood case products in the U.S., staggering when you consider the circumstances in which we live. Or the demand within Musgrave has shifted, right? So we, for a long time, were original manufacturers for other pencil companies. And now today, we've enjoyed fantastic growth in our own brand pencils, thanks to the wonderful messaging and awareness that the studios helped raise of our brand. And as I said before, growing share of that in the custom world.
Yeah. On that note, what would you say that Musgrave's special sauce is? What makes it a great pencil company? Is it the customization aspect of it? Is it the traditions that you uphold, or a mixture of both? Like, what do you think is the thing that makes Musgrave distinct? And maybe we'll start with Tim on.
I think the custom piece is a big one. I think that there's something to the fact that the factory can be really nimble with new ideas, and I mean, we've seen them create new shapes of pencils. There's innovation to be done in pencils, believe it or not. And so I think that, it's interesting to hear Scott talk about the difference in the way that the process is broken down in the factory, because I do think that allows for a lot changes in the production day just based on what's happening in the world. So I think there's a nimbleness to that. And then I do think there's an honoring and an acknowledgement of the history of this place that's not lost on anybody. I mean, you walk in there and it looks like a movie set. And I think that it is special. And I think the people, kind of appreciate that.
How about you, Scott?
Yeah, I would just add to that people are attracted to the history and the nostalgia of made in Tennessee, made in the United States, family-owned business. There's a personal connection, I think, for people to the brand that we like to honor, right? I mean, it's a real privilege to connect with somebody or an organization that says, "Oh man, we're connected to some history here, some history in the United States and in this industry," and they like to honor that, and it's a privilege for us to respond. And then we like to call ourselves a short order cook in the pencil business. Emphasize what Tim was saying. We are nimble. There's a whole opportunity around scented pencils. There's a whole opportunity around different art that can go around the surface of a pencil, or your lumber company on the surface of a carpenter pencil, or it's so I do love our flexibility and responsiveness. I think that also is part of our identity. Strong.
Are you currently exploring scented pencils?
We're currently producing scented pencils.
You are.
We
I mean, I know that there's
it's a separate line. So we have some that we do for a client project, and we have some that are our own branded scented pencils that are coming out later this spring. And it's a micro encapsulation technology of scented oils, and it's really fun. So
whoa.
I mean, it's really fun.
Yeah.
If you bought our Christmas set, you got scented peppermint pencils, for instance.
It looks like that. It looks like I know what I'm asking for this Christmas. So it sounds to me that you guys, despite the fact that you've got these traditions that you really try to uphold, there is a bit of risk taking that happens too, which is pretty cool. Are these based on just internal dreaming big, or are they based on feedback you're getting from people who love Musgrave but would love to see XYZ? Or is it coming from external competitive? Here's what they're doing. Maybe we should do something similar. Like, how does that come together in terms of thinking outside the box?
Well, it's all the above. We have folks who come to us with ideas, which, we have to assess from a cost standpoint, from a longevity and viability standpoint. And then we brainstorm internally and come up with different ideas and see what sticks. So it comes from both places. I mean, as Tim described it, we literally designed a pencil on the fly, walking through the factory, picking up different things and coming up with a new product. And so I don't know that I could say if there's a secret sauce around that, Mike, but just that we remain open to things, and we got to have the right filter. Does this align with who we are? Does this align with the brand? Does this align with our capabilities? And then take it from there.
Are there any risks like that didn't work out? I already love
not yet.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Is there anything coming on the horizon that might be interesting to talk about?
We have but I guess I could reveal that now. We have a set of floral pencils that are going to be scented with 6 different floral scents. They'll be available sometime in late March, I would guess, that come in a tube that look like a vase of flowers and sit on your desk, and hopefully appeals to the nurseries and florists in our customer portfolio. And you can open that thing up and smell one of the flower scents that's in that set. So lavender,
that's amazing.
Rose, and jasmine. Yeah. So that's good.
My wife, Michelle, who's the managing director at MRC, she is a massive flower fan. So looks like I also know what I'm getting her for Christmas. So that'll be nice. I want to talk a little bit more about the collaboration with Studio Delger and Musgrave. In terms of production, what does a typical week look like between the two teams? are they more one-off at this point because you're running on a steady hum, or are you still intrinsically, it's sort of like intimately involved on a week to week basis, or what does that look like?
Yeah, we're talking all the time. I mean, we go down to the factory at least once a quarter just to, be in person and have a very efficient high level meeting. So we're always kind of plugged in. I mean, we're really very close with these guys in terms of like business strategy, and we're collaboratively coming up with the next thing to do. So it's less about answering briefs and more about creating them together. And then, day to day, week to week, where there's constantly kind of behind the scenes stuff to do, keeping up with social media, keeping up with showcasing new products. There's emails to be sent. I mean, there's just all sorts of things. There's, a product catalog that goes out to any buyer that's needs to be updated. And Musgrave has always produced a whole slew of what we call designer pencils for school. So anything that's like, straight A's, perfect attendance, welcome to school, any kind of affinity pencil design. And we're kind of constantly refreshing and relooking at those designs one by one. So there's always something to do. And, and then kind of like underlying that, there's these maybe bigger long-term projects, either reacting to cultural things, timing wise. Seasonally, we got to talk about what's going on for Valentine's Day. What are we doing for back to school? What does Christmas look like? It's August. Don't forget Christmas is coming, that kind of stuff. So it's a whole thing for sure.
Yeah, and Scott, what about for you, and from your perspective as the leader of the company?
One thing I was just going to brag again on the Delgers is that they keep us organized. They keep us focused on the next thing, on the next season, on the next project. And we have a lot of different things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And so we need that consistent nudge to keep our heads focused on the next thing and what's happening. We were very lucky to be licensed to do America 250 pencils this year for the celebration. So they're helping us, remember this, target this for this holiday or that, this purpose. So anyway, there's a management function overall, Mike, that is extremely helpful besides the wonderful creative.
I'm very curious, and I think this is great to talk about for my graphic design listeners, people that are in branding who are working directly with clients in a very similar sort of collaborative way. I'd love to hear from you, Scott, for somebody who doesn't have Studio Delger as the design team. They are the design team, but they're still independent, right? So for a company like Musgrave, who is working with an external team, tell me about why you think it's valuable to have an agency like Studio Delger to be on the pulse of what Musgrave is doing on a regular basis. What value do you see as the pencil company president?
So there's a counselor function that the studio brings in terms of watching trends, watching our message as it plays in the public, as we get approached to participate in the public light. They act as counselor in that regard, not just from a product standpoint, but from a company image standpoint as well. And so I don't know how typical that is or not for a graphic design firm, but they certainly bring that expertise and that skill set and that instinct. That bleeds into what's in media, that bleeds into what we promote and how we promote, that bleeds into when we promote. And so there's an executive function, which I find extremely helpful as president of Musgrave. We don't have a chief marketing officer. We don't have, I'm an engineer, for crying out loud. I did not come to the table with any real instincts around consumer products, but I love pencils, right? And so we have the great collaborative dialogue on a regular basis about how to make that go well, in addition to designing products.
I'm going to speak for Tim because I already know the answer to this, that it is incredibly refreshing to hear you speak like that, because this is something that us as brand designers think about often, about how we see our value in what we bring to the table for our clients. And I am almost 100% certain that Tim understands that it's not just about the fact that you have a cool pencil shop that he gets to walk around in. I'm sure he loves the fact that you understand in such a detailed way, the importance of what they bring to the table for you guys. That is spectacular. I love to hear that. Thank you for sharing that. Tim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know I'm not.
No, you're right. But the thing I would just add on that is that we talk a lot about just shutting up and listening in our studio. And I think that a lot of graphic designers can just remind themselves that the more you know about your client's business and are curious to like actually understand everything else Scott has to deal with, the font you picked might not really be the most important thing on the menu that day, you know? And so having that perspective and like listening and try to understand all the stuff that they're up against every day. And then how can I help? What do I know from the past that may be, valuable to contribute instead of, I think a lot of times graphic designers will want to come in and like demand trust and be seen as the expert. And it's been really helpful to actually shed the ego and just try to learn as much as possible and then sort of bring some help to the table. So for what it's worth, I would just add that.
I absolutely love that. When I get a chance to speak to young designers, one of the things they'll ask me is, what are the things that I should be thinking about when I get into the workforce? One of the 3 or 4 or 5 things that I always share is that you need to be ready to absorb information, do more listening than talking because you're here to serve their mission, right? So I love that. That's so great. Now, with just a little bit more time on our hands, I do want to try and just capture a few more things. One thing just on the partnership, but just a little bit further. Do you guys ever disagree creatively on ideas, and how do you work through that? I'm sure there's a bit of potentially healthy, I don't know if tension's the right word, but maybe some healthy disagreements that come into play that then spring off potentially into maybe a different and better solution.
Yeah, I think that we've earned a lot of trust, and I really appreciate the amount of. I mean, we got a long rope, let's just say, from Musgrave. So we contribute, some out there thoughts, and sometimes we run with it. Other times, if we're being asked to do something that we maybe have doubts about, typically I would say my approach is I will absolutely show you for any client. I'll show you what you're asking for exactly and as best as I can execute it. And here's another idea of how you might achieve the same goal, with a different angle. So I really, really try to say yes 99% of the time so that when you say, that's not good, it actually means something. So I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what Scott's opinion on that is, but I don't think we disagree too much as much as we find our way to the answer.
Yeah, I would say if you look on the floor, there are 4 or 5 dead soldiers of projects that either the studio thought was good and needed to fly, or that we thought was good and needed to fly, and wound up not moving forward for one reason or another. And it starts with trust, and that's the name of the game, and that's where we get to the end product set and that sort of thing. And sometimes there have been a time or two when I said, well, thank you for your input, and I'll move on anyway. And then I might regret having done that, but that's pretty rare. As Tim said, we typically find ourselves on the same page anyway, and through the dialogue and what he started out with and what we start out with becomes something totally different at the end from what either one of us started with. So it becomes a collaborative solution.
Yeah.
We just generate so much stuff that you can let this one go and that one's going to be great. And there's just a lot the output it's a lot, so it's all good, at least good. And, if you do at least good all the time, you're going to get some great stuff in there.
When you meet to talk about future content or whatever, what does that look like? Is it a, kind of walking through mood boards? Is it just like pencil and paper? You're just kind of pitching ideas? I'm sure it runs the gamut depending on what avenue you're going with, whether it's social media or a new packaging idea or things like that.
Yeah, it's kind of all the above, just depends on the context and depends on the project, depends on really how big of a lift it's going to be, of how deep we need to go. But like I said, we get a lot of trust. So a lot of the stuff you see posted on social Scott saw it the day before and gave a thumbs up. I mean, it's a ton of trust, so that's part of it. The other, sometimes we can just get away with the conversation of here's what I'm thinking, show a sketch, make some adjustments. I mean, pretty typical process like that. As a practice, I try to avoid too much upfront theoretical talking. Let's just get something on the page and then go from there. So that's kind of a weird non-answer of we do it every which way.
Yeah.
And just for some of the bigger projects, obviously there's a long time frame of back and forth and adjustments and getting down to the final solution.
Yeah.
They're wonderful.
Now, I would assume that with the kind of prolific amount of content or design that's being output, to a certain degree, there has to be some sort of meter as to like, okay, this is a great idea, but also the cost in which to get it done is starting to put it in the red, and as a designer, you don't necessarily know the numbers that you need to be kind of considering when it comes to whatever you're trying to, pitch as a next sort of piece of content you're going to put on social media or packaging or what have you. How do you walk through that? Is it just like, let's see what happens? It's a cool idea. And if we can make it work within the budget, we move on to something else, or maybe move on until we can allocate this great idea to next year's budget. Do those things come into play as well?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes goes back to part of listening. It's like, well, we have this idea, but the problem is it's going to cost too much because of X, Y, and Z. I mean, we get down into like component costs and packaging and shipping, real nitty gritty, and say, okay, well, we don't have to hang on too tightly to any of those details. What if we shift this and that and still make it look good? Can we execute that way? I think also what's cool about the factory aspect is you can try stuff on a small run. And if it's successful, great. And if not, it was, limited edition and we're done.
It's an example. What would be an example of that?
What did we, I mean, we've launched products that just didn't sell as quickly as we hoped they would. And that's fine. You ran a minimum run of, I don't know what, 10,000 and sell through them. And that's that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So as we start to wind this down, I want to talk a little bit more about the legacy of Musgrave a bit. Scott, where do you see your role and the responsibility that comes with preserving Musgrave as American manufacturing and just as a whole? I mean, I'm sure you probably you have thoughts about it, right? That there's maybe a sense of responsibility of American being a participant in an active participant in American manufacturing with globalization being such a, key part of commerce, world commerce. Where do you see your role and the responsibility of Musgrave?
Well, first of all, I see a responsibility to the family to preserve the brand, to preserve the role in our community. You can go back to our payroll logs that I've looked at in the early 30s, and you see the names of families that still have family members working here. And so I feel a strong sense of responsibility, yes, but commitment, right? Commitment to the family to preserve and grow and make it succeed and be able to pass it on to the next generation. I feel commitment to the community. If you look at the seal of the city of Shelbyville, it's got a pencil in addition to the walking horse, and because we're known as the Pencil City because of our heritage. So I feel a commitment to sustain that. I feel a commitment to maintain and uphold the tradition of quality and craftsmanship that so many industries in the United States have established and enjoyed and promoted. You look at some of the iconic brands, like I think of Harley Davidson, for instance, think of Caterpillar, and there's a whole long list of U.S. products that you say, man, there's pride in that. And so we want to sustain that pride and while not sacrificing the brand and the product quality. We talk a lot about sourcing more of our components in the United States. And so there are active projects here to try to bring more U.S. content to our product. And I can't talk in depth about that here, but know that that's also actively part of our identity and where we want to head as the company. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. What advice would you give, Scott, to other growing privately owned manufacturing companies today?
Get outside perspective. And it's really easy to do a lot of navel gazing as a small family-owned company, whether it's on your board, whether it's an executive function from a design studio, whether it's listening to your customer feedback on an active, ongoing basis to adapt with them because their needs are always changing. And I would say just keep an open mind and get outside feedback would be the number one piece of advice that I would give. And obviously doing all the right basic blocking and tackling to manage the business accordingly.
Right. Yeah. Final question. Where do you see Musgrave in the next 10 to 20 years?
Yeah, I see us continuing to step out and grow our own brand and broadening that awareness and loyalty across the U.S. consumer base, more direct to consumer.
And Tim, what are your hopes as basically the creative director of Musgrave? Where do you hope to see Musgrave from your perspective as a brand?
Thriving. I mean, I want to see, when I visit, I want to see it busy. You know, I mean, it's like every machine running down there is the best evidence that we're doing our job. Is it working? You know, are we making stuff? I think a lot about, you know, it's kind of fun to think about how I'm imagining I'm collaborating with somebody from the past, and am I leaving behind anything that somebody's going to find in the back of a filing cabinet? Like, oh my God, look at this, you know, in the years in the future, you know, the timeline is continuing. So I like to think about that. And I like to think about how the stuff that we're producing, you know, reflects out into the marketplace, but also gives, I think, the people who work there a sense of pride for the place that they work at is special. And so I'm looking forward to kind of continuing.
I love it. Now, I guess maybe one last question for you, Tim, as a designer. If for all of the creatives that are listening to this podcast right now, what is the one, if they've never purchased a Musgrave pencil before, for all our artists that are listening on their podcast app, what's the one pencil they should start with?
Well, if you're an artist, I'm going to answer this a couple ways. If you're an artist, you should buy the Unigraph set. It's every grade, of course. So you get the softest to the hardest, and it's just fun to work with those. And then if you're interested in something a little unique, I just always say the Tennessee Red is a really special one. It's made with wood that no one else makes pencils out of for a lot of reasons. But the story behind the Tennessee Red is a great one. So I would pick up a pack of those too.
Love it. Yeah, I remember seeing some video content about that too. It was very fascinating. Well, that's awesome. That is you heard it here first. This is where you need to go for those two specific pencils. Those are the ones you need to go after. Gentlemen, Scott, Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know both of you. I loved hearing the perspective of not only the president who's running the actual pencil company itself, but also the creative director. And it's been a fascinating journey. And I can't wait to see Musgrave continue to thrive out in the world. And I can't wait to see more of the awesome packaging and pencils. And I'm really looking forward to that flower set that's going to be coming out. Very excited about that. Tim, it's been a real pleasure getting to know you as well. And I wish you all the best of luck, and let's keep in touch. Okay.
Thanks so much.
Privilege. Thank you for having us.
All right. Cheers.
Thanks for spending a little bit of time with us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram for all things Pencil Pushers at the Pencil Pushers Podcast. And if you want to see what I'm up to, you can check out my brand studio on Instagram at MRC Brand Design and my own personal spot at Ikimo Dasser. That's my name, Mike Rosado, spelled backwards. EKIMODASOR. So that wraps it up for me. Until the next one, be safe, be kind, and see you next time.